Today I'm going to tell you the story of Ursa Major and Ursa Minor. A lot of civilizations have stories about big bears in the sky. The Greeks call her Callisto, and she was friends with Zeus, who's the big top god of Greek mythology. Now, Zeus was married to a very jealous woman named Hera, hated when he'd go hang out with his friends without her. So, for him to spend time with his friends, he would change himself into different animals, and with Callisto, he would change himself into a bear. So one day, he and Callisto are bears, hanging out in the woods, doing bear things, when Hera decides that she needs Zeus home right now. Now, he rushes back so he doesn't get into trouble, but he forgot to change Callisto back into a human first. And along comes a hunter who sees this huge bear, pulls out a bow and arrow, and just as he's getting ready to let go, Zeus sees what's about to happen, rushes down, grabs her by her bear tail, swings her over his head, and tosses her up into the night sky. Which explains that extra long bear tail, right? Bears don't have tails that long. Now, Zeus came in just the nick of time. That hunter didn't realize it, but he was getting ready to shoot his own mother. Ugh. Now, Zeus wanted to keep the whole family together. So he took this hunter named Arcus, changed him into a bear as well, grabbed him by a smaller bear tail, whipped him over his head, and tossed him up in the night sky right beside his mother. And that's how we got Ursa Major and Ursa Minor. And that's one story. But a little bit closer to home, the Cherokee Native Americans have their own story about a big bear in the sky. They did not think that that was a bear with an extra long bear tail. They believed that those were 3 warriors chasing behind her. One day, they saw this big bear outside their village and decided to make the biggest, tastiest bear stew that the village had ever had. The first warrior had the bow and arrow to shoot the bear. The second had the cooking pot, which is that little smaller star right beside. And the third had all the firewood needed to cook it up nice and hot. But this was a super smart bear. She led them all the way to the edge of the world and then jumped up into the night sky. But those warriors weren't going to be left behind. They jumped into the night sky right behind her. Throughout the course of the year, this constellation makes a huge circle in the northern sky, and those 3 warriors are always right behind her. In the fall, the constellation is low, right above our horizon. You could say parallel, right above our horizon. And in the Cherokee story, they say that that's when that first warrior is able to catch up and get a couple of arrows off. And it's the blood from the bear's injuries that causes the leaves to change colors. Okay, we know that there's more science behind it than that, but they were able to explain how nature changes the color of the leaves with their stories. It's pretty sweet. Most of the time when I tell stories about Ursa Major and Ursa Minor, I have somebody stop me and say, hold on, don't you really mean the Big Dipper? I don't. The Big Dipper is part of Ursa Major, but it's what's known as an asterism. Can you say asterism? Right on. That means a more recognizable shape in a larger constellation. So if we think back to that Cherokee story, right here we have our Big Dipper, right? These 3 stars, those are the warriors, and this is the bear's butt. Put those together and you end up with the Big Dipper. Now, if I talk about the Big Dipper, we have to talk about the Little Dipper as well, right? It's not the brightest constellation in the night sky, but it's important for one star in particular, right at the end of the handle. Does anyone know what that star is? It's the North Star, also called Polaris. It's super important because it always stays in the same place in the night sky all year long. So you could be a pioneer headed out west, or a pirate on the open seas, and you could use that star to help you find your way. My favorite constellations to tell stories about are Cassiopeia the Queen and Cepheus the King. They're 2 constellations that are each made up of 5 stars. Cassiopeia kind of looks like a W or an M, depending on the time of year, and Cepheus the King looks like a stick house. Seriously, draw just a line right across and you'll have the roof and the bottom part of the house. But we're going to talk more about Cassiopeia first. That's what she would rather have us do. She believed she was the most beautiful woman on the face of the planet. Ask her, she'd tell you herself. And one day she made the mistake of saying that she was more beautiful than the sea goddesses in the ocean. I know, right? Big mistake. So they go to their father Poseidon, the god of the oceans, and said, "Are you really going to let this woman talk about us like that? You need to do something. We are not having it." And Poseidon was not having that. So he created a huge sea monster and sent it to gobble Cassiopeia and her country up in one big bite. Cassiopeia did not want to get chewed up. I don't know anyone who does. So she and her husband, Cepheus the king, go to a fortune teller to look for advice. And the fortune teller said, "Man, I got this. Why don't you take your daughter Andromeda? She's pretty. Tie her up by the ocean, let the monster eat her instead, problem solved." What do you think Cassiopeia said to that? "Oh, she said that's a fantastic idea. I don't know why I didn't think of that. I can just tie my daughter up there. I don't need her. Isn't that terrible? Oh gosh, that's just so mean." So Andromeda, tied up by the ocean, the monster is headed right for her when on the horizon appears a hero. His name is Perseus. He's riding the winged horse Pegasus, swoops down, cuts her chains, tosses her on the back of the horse, and they fly off into the sunset to live happily ever after. It's so beautiful. Okay, but moral of the story, Cassiopeia doesn't get gobbled up like she is supposed to. Poseidon is furious. So he shows up at the castle, grabs her while she's sitting on her throne, chucks her up into the night sky. And her husband, Cepheus the king, for going along with whatever plan his wife came up with, is in the night sky right beside her. Let that be a lesson. Stand up to people if you see bullying happening.